And welcome to our July edition of Sooner, Safer, Happier EMEA Meetup. It's lovely to have you all back. It's lovely to be a part of it again. And we have Zak Moore, a good friend of the meetup, who turns up every single time and joins in the conversation. And we've had some fantastic conversations. And as the conversations have gone on throughout the year, we've said to ourselves, Zak, why aren't you here actually giving the talk? Because you lead us in such interesting ways. And Anne and I were talking just before everyone joined about how sort of science, physics based we can be. So we get that sense of probably physics envy about how the world just works in a very, very structured way. And I, for one, and we were saying about our co-host Jolper, and we often talk about measurement and making sense of things in a very sort of scientific manner when we talk about the scientific method. And one of the lovely things about having Zak around is that Zak is all about creativity, often talks about music, other art forms, the Bauhaus movement. Frame of reference is absolutely outstanding. So I, for one, am really looking forward to the conversation tonight and what Zak's going to show us, which is called, actually, is it Don't Drift? Strategic Engagement for the Experience Economy. I think that was it. Super. So without further ado, welcome, Zak. Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. So you should have the front page for the presentation. Is that showing? Thank you. So I really like the Sooner, Safer, Happier way of working. And I use the contents as a template for this talk. I've written a couple of books myself. The last one is Co-Marathon Man, which is on the top. And what I'm going to do is show the way that I take techniques that I learned for Co-Marathon Man and how I apply them using the Sooner, Safer, Happier ways of work. What I really liked about the Sooner, Safer, Happier book was that it starts off with economics and it ends with economics. I see the economic way of working changing. I can do that because I'm so old. I came in when it was commodities, goods. I took part in the service revolution when the city took off in the late 80s and through the 90s. And I see it now moving towards experience and transformations. And that's going to need some new skills and thinking. When we consider how well we are doing against competitors in our fields, the CEO of most companies will be monitoring the Net Promoter Score. If our Net Promoter Score goes down in comparison to our competitors, we know that we're in a state of strategic drift. There will be a call that comes out. I've seen it before at LexisNexis. And what has to happen is that we take Mintzberg and Waters' way of allowing emergence to come through to hit the strategic way of working. Too many Agile people don't see the way of bringing emergence into strategy, and too many strategists think that Agile doesn't have the strategic capability to bring it in. So they always talk about alignment. Alignment is good, and emergence is even better. So the skills that are required as we move through the paradigms that I see in the way of work is going from standard Agile into the ways of work. And having been here a few times, I know that people are into design thinking, systems thinking. What we're going to bring in is modal thinking, which allows you to apply social, rational, and intuitive ways of work. For inspiration, I was putting this together as lockdown started, and I found that 100 years ago, the situation was worse than we have it today. it was the end of the First World War, where the cream of a generation had been killed. Spanish flu was more virulent and deadly than COVID. There were lots of art schools building up, and Hollywood kicked off at the same time. Most of them learned from William Morris with his arts and crafts movement. And what they were trying to do was to make the arts and crafts accessible to people that didn't have much money. And the other thing that they had was the threat of mass production coming through. Whereas today we have a perceived threat of automation. So we're trying to use automation to our advantage. There is a hierarchy in the arts, which start with architecture and roll up through the bottom 5, which come from Hegel and Schopenhauer. From the turn of the 20th century, because of technology being allowing us to record music and put it out on records, people could dance because you didn't have to rely on musicians who were drunk out the skull at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night down the normal juke joint, or spoons as it's called these days. Movies were coming along as well, and they quickly went from just moving pictures to having sound in, and we see them today. And now games is coming in on top. And these allow us to tap into the skills for the experience economy, which come from the World Health Organization. And as we step through, we use one of the experience design models, which allows us to move from the prosaic, the way that we use Agile, into the design thinking for the mindful, arts and crafts for the memorable, arts for the meaningful, and the transformation is how our efforts are seen on the bottom line. So this will be a talk of 2 halves, or 2 hats, more or less. And what we're going to do is encourage you to think like a pirate to begin with. So I think the pirate way of work it's got the spirit of Agile about it. You're known by name. You might be a privateer, so long as you're not raiding your own company or your own country, you're fine. You're interested in crew morale, and you're working by stealth, which ties into the asymmetric advantage we're talking about. Captains are so important to leadership. They're known by role or by rank, and we all play a role. They're more interested in efficient administration and troop morale, and they have to outthink pirates ultimately. So as we go through, this is the base model that we use to split the skills into the hard and the soft. The hard skills are the technical ones, which are covered by digital data and technology, DDAT, and Sophia to grade them. As service companies in this area, we know the skills that we have, and we use the grading to set our rate cards, which allows us to charge our large clients like government sufficient fees for us to survive. From where I started, it was just, here's a computer, start using it. Digital data and technology is moving around, and we do have the user-centered design coming through, which in some cases I think is a good thing, and in other cases it may be better off in another part of the organization. That's neither here nor there. So for me, Bauhaus, the similarities I found with what they were trying to do and what I'm trying to do were superb. It was started by a guy called Walter Gropius. He was an architect that couldn't draw. You might think that's a bit of a drawback. Sorry, the pun. But he then realized he had to collaborate. So this building is their second building, the Dessau building, and its stairwell was designed to allow students to collaborate, mix and mingle. It's very similar to the concept that Apple used when they were designing their workplaces. It's used a lot in the WeWork places that we go to. The way of working was workshop focused. It was minimal, it was influential, We can see it with the buildings that are around today. The font that I'm using for this presentation, Arial, is a Bauhaus-inspired font. Now, the key thing that most people don't understand is that the teaching method that they produced for art and design is used by 95% of art schools around the world. And I see it as a key to what we can use today. So their teaching method is called Vorkurs, and we're going to apply it for knowledge workers. And the teaching method took 3 years, and it worked outside in, where you do 1 year study, specialize in the workshop, and then you would have your evidence-based initiative, as it's called, where you would design and build something. To bring it up to the modern day, we have the Neubau process, which is new business as usual. We have 2 walls in the building. The periodic table is where you can do creativity for pirates, and we have the short wall, which is where the lightweight administration and bureaucracy goes. As you can see, we work differently from the outside in, so that you can use this at work tomorrow. We start with the modes at the center of something, and when you have a problem that you're looking at, you use 4 phases of scan, analyze, lean, and value. Matt, can you drop the link to the Creatable into the chat? Because most of us have to lead other people or coach other people, we have 6 P's that go around the scan, analyze, lean, value, and we will look at those as we go. Thanks, Matt. So if you hop on that link, one of the beauties that I've had during lockdown is when people see this for the first time, I can see their faces. Sometimes they lean in a bit more, go, ooh. Other times they go, that's very pretty. And other times they go, oh, there's too much there. So if you come back to me, I will show you the power of this tool that we have. The tool itself comes from the OU's MBA with their creative problem solving. It took longer to get permission to use it than it did to write it. So the Creatable allows us to develop #1 in-demand skill, creativity. It starts with the Vorkurs, and I'm going to show how it goes through the table. So with the table, it has at the bottom a dark gray line, which are the 6 main management methods going from waterfall through the different agile variations and ending up with strategizer. You can cherry pick any bits of those you want to make your agile work for you. It has end-to-end processes, which allow you to get into the creativity. The one that I use most frequently in there is the Disney one. So if you think of a family watching a Disney movie, you've got the preteens, the teens and parents. Preteens laugh at the slapstick, the teens laugh at what's going on, and then they go quiet because they realize there's a passage of life coming through. And the adults laugh with a bit of nostalgia. And when you apply that to business, your tech teams are like the preteens, the middle managers are like the teens, and the senior managers are like the parents. To make this work, there's an 8-step divergent convergent process, which is color-coded, going from the exploration through gathering, generation, screen, prioritize, and plan. And each of the elements are color-coded to each step. Now, you don't need to do all 8 steps, but when you click on one element, it will bring up an overview. This stuff is designed to work online and offline, so it will give you a list of resources that you need if you're going to use it in a physical space, people working face-to-face. And the other bit that I draw your attention to is on the right-hand sidebar, there are 3 modes. the analytic, the intuitive, and the social. And you can see that they light up the modes at the center of the Vorkurs model. So when we're in pirate mode, we work off the subsocial mode, which is ad hoc and covert. So you can think of yourself as James Bond. And then you can find that there are templates for this in Mural and Miro. I make time to do this myself because I use a technique called a morning page. If you do Agile, you know what a stand-up is. I do a stand-up for one. I reflect on the day before, which gets my life in balance, and then I plan the work that I have to do. And coming back from meningitis through Co-Marathon Man, I picked this technique up from Julia Cameron. I'm now finding more and more references to it on the internet. It's a very simple way to get things together. On my daily to-do list, I also have backup tasks in case I get blocked. And underneath that, I have Flowrack activities. Flowrack is very important as we get older. So rhetorical statement is, you brushed your teeth this morning. You will brush your teeth before you go to bed. The non-rhetorical question is, how do you brush your brain? And this is the way that I go through it. So this is based on research by Herbert Benson, an MD from Harvard University, and it ties in with a lot of research that's being done at the moment on Alzheimer's research. They found that the plaques that build up in the brain can be taken out by flow if you can access the gamma waves. So let me back up a bit there. We have 5 types of brainwave. From the 2 that are there when we sleep, deep sleep and light sleep, we have alpha waves, which are the kind of things that maybe you drive along the M25 or the M40 and you get to your destination, you can't remember the journey because your brain's in that kind of meditative state. Beta, which we're in at the moment, and gamma, which is when we're peaking and doing things. So what I tend to do is figure out the best time of day for me to do that. So it could be when I'm at a trough in the ultradian rhythm, or it could be when I'm at a peak, and I will try different bits. So when I've got a problem that I'm having trouble finding, I go into the release mode from the little tooth with the toothbrush at the top, and that provides the nitric acid, which makes me step away from the problem. And then when I come back to it, I get the good stuff, the dopamine, endorphins, and the anandamide, that's how you pronounce it, which allegedly do the good work against the plaques that are building up in the brain. So if you ever come out of a meeting and you feel as if you've been banging your head against the wall, that is your body telling you that you're building up those plaques in your brain. And by doing this technique a couple of times a day, you get to do it. So do you have the next link, Matt, for Solo Collab? Thank you. So with Solo Collab, it's a way of standing on the shoulders of giants who have gone before us. It takes a slot machine principle, which was based on Brian Eno's oblique strategies. We then tie in Russell Eichhoff's F-laws and Alan Perlis's aphorisms about computing, and then how to sell using David Ogilvy et al. And this allows us to be critical when we're looking at our business, because for most of us, if we're not the CEO or if we're not in the C-suite, It's not really career enhancing to be vocally critical of the bosses, but there are ways that we have to be able to explain to them. I find it with military guys, I can do it a lot easier as long as I don't do it in front of the troops. So at the bottom of the spinners is a way of a lean scene that you could use. And the lean scene is just a very simple way of taking the agile concept of a user story, but turning it internal so it becomes a business story. Now, I'm sure we've all been in the situation where we've had fantastic business ideas and they just seem to get thwarted by the people above us. So we act as the protagonist, but the other people are antagonists. And because we don't have the bigger picture, we can't appreciate what they're seeing. So this template can be filled in with very simple pitch. Usually I get teams to do it. Out of a team of 8, I would expect 3 coming out whenever they're asked for. And this allows us to move into the persuade and collaborate section of the soft skills that are used. At Harrods, we used it to get the boss to come and speak to the troops for the first time. And they enjoyed that. They could then see that their boss was constrained by the technical agreements they had with Microsoft. When we're doing this, we as coaches or facilitators have to be able to adapt the story so that if the strategist shows some interest and says, could you do a bit of this? You go, yeah, of course we can. And you get it through and you adapt and bring it back to the teams to implement. And with the lean scene, you may then use the way that trees are being planted. So beforehand, we're speaking to Matt and Anne, and this is a game design template that 5-year-olds are using. And we see this coming through more and more in the user-centered design. So the way that you can get it to work, is everybody okay? Is my changing hat, I had a very limited exposure to the Army Reserves in the 1980s. And you can figure out for yourself if you think the Army is more agile than the place you work in, or if you think the place you work in is more agile than the Army. I certainly have my opinions. And what I've seen with the Army is that they have the central planning, where the staff handbook is used. There's a small red book that's handed to every cadet that goes through Sandhurst. It's called Serve to Lead. If you've ever wondered where servant leadership comes from, it's worth having a read of that book. It's an anthology of leadership. It's where I start and it's where I stop with leadership. I find that everything that's in there can be transferred across to the current ways of working that we have. The teams that are on tour, they have a different handbook. It's very similar to the central staff planning handbook, but it always starts off with question 0, which is, what have I been asked to do and why? And the way that they plan is that they take the instruction from above, they plan forward, they plan backward, they plan 1 up and 2 up. So it's this discipline that we transfer into the way that we work. So even though we are saying creativity is the way forward, this thing is undercut, underpinned with we'll take the information down, we'll then plan forward, plan backward, and present. And that allows us to take the intended strategy as it is, be able to assess it rationally and objectively, and put it out as a realized strategy that will come to people in the end. So there's a little more than the lean scene. So I'm just going to quickly run through this. A4 hash is an update to A3 thinking, the Toyota systems way of working. On the background, the current condition is where the scan part of the stuff comes in. We create goals for how we're going to put the analysis in, which we get from the root cause analysis. I tend to use a mixture of the Creatable and a strategy template palette that I will share at the end. The actions, because most people are agile, they versed, we've put in confirmation, definition of done, makes it easier. This thing is very similar to an OKR, objective or management by objective, which has been around since the 80s with Andy Grove at Intel, and then got picked up by Google. What I've found with OKRs is that they fail to see the contingency. They don't look at the operational return on investment. They have KPIs, and they don't see the strategic return on investment. On the last gig I was on, a government gig, I found that the people who were working at an operational level were confused as to what the strategic need was. They turned their operational needs into the strategic need, developed some KPIs which were totally against the KPIs that were in the strategic balance scorecard, and wondered why things weren't working out. So this is just a way of saying there's better. OKRs are very good to get the ideas in place, but to have success, look at it this way. The contingency, I used 3 different risk models. We've got Rome, which we picked up from SAFE, which is one of the dark gray boxes on the Creatable. We have VTFU, which comes from Silicon Valley Product Group, which is a way of where middle managers will be looking at the customer value, feasibility, the viability, and the usability. And again, that can be fed up into the constrained RAID log, which comes from your typical waterfall strategy way. The scale on the left is known as the BAU-fort scale. It's based on wind, but we've just used it for ourselves. Another part of Sooner, Safer, Happier that I really liked was this ability to create a learning ecosystem. So when we look at operational ROI, we work left to right using this ontology of tools, which is known as the Value Chain Blueprint, made by Barak Lev. It comes from the Annals of Knowledge Management. And what you tend to do with this is use the original version until you're comfortable with it, and then you can start to create your own taxonomy inside it for your specific needs. And you would ask the teams that are making the A4 hash business case to just highlight the areas that we think we're going to make some gains on. So it could be personal value through the discovery and learning, or commercial value. And you can take that up to your operations and strategy people without having to sit down and spend a day calculating the numbers. This gives you the project view, the horizontal view of the company. And similarly, we do a thing with the strategic view where we loop down through the company. And again, this ties into the learning ecosystem, because this is based at team level on innovation, learning, and adaptation, which we've already established through the lean scenes. It allows us to come in and look at the portfolio to manage risk. So we as middle managers can share information with our peers in ways that they probably aren't. It's a way of breaking down the silos between the departments that I come across so frequently. And at the top line, we achieve efficiency in current operations. Automation is the bit that we've added in here against national differences when globalization was there. What we're really looking at is the scope and scale economies. So the way that we ask teams to work when they come up with an initiative is to try it for themselves over a 6 to 8 week period. And if it works, then they share it with their peer teams. It's just a faster way of putting things in. The other bit from Sooner, Safer, Happier is the ability to understand flow as it's seen by different people in the team. When I work with the value stream consortia, we're usually looking at the stuff in the middle. It's generally sold to banks, and they are more interested in the Kanban approach to getting their value stream worked out. In other places, we might go onto the international supply chains where companies publishing to one degree is where we used this the last time. But the way that I see it on the team level is more musical. I see that as a scale with octaves that people can use. And the way that I think of systems being built these days is that if you can script an experience or a game or a service, then you should be able to turn that into a screenplay being the operative word, which is storyboarded. And I think that should be done prior to engaging all the technical team. And what I look for ideally is somebody that's across all the 6 DDAT areas and will act like the composer to put the soundtrack in under the screenplay. I do realize that some of it needs orchestration. So you would hire in technical developers to work on that. And what I'd like to take in, excuse me, are the masters of their instruments. So the other bit that we see in SSH, can you share the SatNav link, please, Matt? Thank you. Over the last year, I've been working in 3 different government departments. We introduced the ways of working to them, and though it pains me to say, they're very, very good at the bit that's not technology when it comes to IT. So where in SSH, we look for technical excellence. The government's way of work has the user needs, the process, and the technology. And their way of working, if you hit the overview bar navigation bit on the M25 map, it shows what I think is happening. So the government have 4 hold points for any project that goes. And I see it as being like the M25, where you start at Dartford and go clockwise round, and you'll get held at Cobham services, which is like the alpha review, South Mim services for beta, and Thurrock services before you go live. And if you fail to pass any of the needs that the GTS review team have, you're then in a bit of a dilemma, because you've got to split your team so that some start moving towards the next phase. So if you're going from alpha, you get held at alpha. Some have to go back and sort out what went wrong in the process. The area that I tend to sit is on the inner ring road and I speak to the people in the middle, which is like Westminster, bloody no information coming out of it whatsoever. Now, the other thing that we've put in here is the Ace Cafe, which is where motorcyclists would meet during the 50s and 60s. And there is an unspoken race, which is called the Terre Arse Trophy, which is to see how fast you can get around the M25 on your motorbike. It's much easier to navigate. It's usually done in the morning when there's no cars about. And you can start looking at the different speeds that people can go through. So part of the thing that I would love to be able to do is to use this good stuff, which if you refresh your screens, you can see that it starts to pull up questions which are coming from reviews that have been publicly put out, which allows us to look ahead in the projects that we are doing for government clients or for private clients who haven't thought of these considerations. So this is very much at a studio level app. If you've got any ideas on how that can be improved, I'm quite willing to hear in a co-creative kind of way. And the salvonomics of it. How does this stuff get built? Well, because you're working the sprint team, and because you might take a 15-minute break every 2 hours, you can cover this off as a sunk cost. There are plenty of companies I work in where you have to take that 15-minute break. If you've got creative tools and a bunch of post-it notes, you can plaster a wall in 15 minutes. You could take yourself off and think using one of the modes or two of the modes. You could surreptitiously use the computer and design a workshop in Miro. And the way that you would bill it is you would just bill against the project that you're working on at the time. Or you can charge to an innovation cost center. And because you know what your metrics are that you're running against, and because you know what the team velocity metrics are, you can very quickly see that if you're starting to drop off, you can bin the initiative. And this is how an initiative usually runs and gets reported. So this goes back to the marginal gains that we were looking at, the economies of scope and scale, where you get one team to run an initiative, and they will normally work in one of these 4 shapes. These are story shapes which come from Kurt Vonnegut, who published his master's thesis in anthropology in 1953. And it's very similar to the shapes of movies that we have. Yeah. So when I see an S-curve that looks like the creation story, I know it's a myth. I know that there are other shapes that have to be taken. And these shapes are more like the morale of the people that are doing the initiative. Because this is a new thing to them, because they're being creative, they can feel that they're a bit stressed. So when it starts off, man in the hole scenario, start off, everything's fine, and then something else happens and you've got to go through it. As a facilitator or a boss that understands the process, I can go in and get the guy back up above the level very quickly, or the girl, depending on what's happening. From bad to worse, we see it from time to time. If somebody is continually going down a route where they can't get things done, just kill the initiative or give it to someone else and put them on something that's good for them. And which way is up? That's the way that our staff usually like to see us. Conscientious, consistent, level-headed, well-balanced. The which way up movie style or theatre is actually Hamlet, where you find that you're questioning yourself about the meaning of life and everything. EastEnders is very much like it. It's a slow-moving plot with very little happening. And the way that we report is with the use case story. So this is almost like the screenplay or the lean scene that you had put into the 3 phases comes out, and you can reflect on it and share with other people. And the poly value is the way of seeing the metrics that you're able to produce for the customer. You should be able to see it on the bottom line. Strategy, we get that from the A4 hash, as we do with the operations. And the team. Now, we are outcomes focused. So this is from a company in Amsterdam who recruited a team of 20 developers split into 3 individual teams from Poland. The way that we use this is to measure the psychological place. It's a model by Joran Ekval, which was published in 2008. And it builds on the work of Denise Rousseau, an applied psychologist who looks into psychological contracts and organizations. And what we use is Ekval's model, which you can use tomorrow. I'll share the link at the end, to get out and create a token that you then send to your team. This whole thing is anonymous, because if you get people to register for one of the psychometric testing, or you get them to register for psychological safety through Harvard, because their names go on it, they will start to game the system. Whereas with this, because it's anonymous for an individual, but collective at a team level, you get a better set of results. And the results look like this. The 10 dimensions are easy and straightforward. The 2 lines in the middle, the blue line is your team line, and the pink line is a benchmark that we have taken from more than 300 companies over the last 10 years that this has been running. So what it does is it allows you to compare against the average. And then where you're in the lower reaches of things, maybe your conflicts are a bit of a concern, you get a set of ranked dimensions underneath. And there's a book that Keith, who's on the call, and I co-wrote and got it out in 2014. And it topped the Kindle charts, which I'd completely forgotten about when I came out of my coma, which led me to read to write the second book. Now, sorry to have bored you on a day where you should be out drinking. So this is me coming to the end. If you want this stuff, I will make the slides available through Matt. You can just ask him. You can watch the video and come to the end, and you will find that the website timeandemotion.com, which is a play on time and motion, but we want to get it working, has all the information that we've covered here. There's some example transformations. And if you hit the takeaway section, you'll see at the bottom, there's a set of links that will take you to the Creatable, the solo collab. Team Wellbeing is the model I've just shared for your teams. And there's a bunch of templates that you can get on the right. And that's me.
Zak, thank you so much. What a wealth there. My head's spinning, which is easily done, to be fair. Yeah, so I mean, anyone who has any questions or wants to talk any more about any of those tools that Zak's presented to us, please do unmic or unmute, sorry, or throw anything in the chat. One thing I was thinking about, though, they're right at the very end with the creative climate change. Just something that I've seen elsewhere, and I think Gartner use it a lot. They have this term, the stalking horse, I believe, where the benchmarks It's always sort of wise to say that that's an average of a set of people we've put this in front of. They might be very, very odd,
Yeah,
or that, you know, they're idiosyncratic, or so yeah, it's sort of averages of different types of people. Nice to see, but I wouldn't always compare myself to it, maybe.
yeah. So what we did with that one was we used the DDAT teams. So technical teams, when we run it with small companies that might have a C-suite and 2 sales teams, it's a completely different profile that they bring up. So what we found was we started running it on sites where I was contracting, and the contractors were telling their recruitment agents, and the recruitment agents came in and said, "Can we have a shot of that, please?" And what they found was that they did it, and there was one team that they needed to increase the debates. So we got them to act like Fleabag, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, to get people just talking, break the fourth wall mentality. And the sales went up 25% a quarter. And I think it's because if you take an interest in people and do a measurement and then come back and go, "Oh, can you try this for 3 months and then we'll see how it is?" And so it was a win-win-win situation.
Interesting, yeah.
Can I just pick up Matt's point about, you know, were these companies and organizations genuinely average? I think you've got a good one in that actually with any kind of tool like this, it's going to be the organizations who kind of know at some level we've got a problem here and we need to do something about it, but are actually going to pick it up and use it well. And the hard reality is there are going to be lots of other organizations where it is either not known or not recognized that things are suboptimal. And that's the hard reality with any change tool. But the other side of this is that if you can persuade your organization or your clients to actually make use of it, you've actually got an unfair advantage, which is not a bad place to be.
It is. And the other thing I like about that tool is that it allows individual teams to put forward their ideas. So when people try and do a block move to Agile over a large company, they don't appreciate that the individual teams, 1, don't want to change Lloyd's Bank, 2, they've got different needs that affect each other, 3, they're all talking to each other on social media channels that nobody's paying attention to, and 4, you're not harnessing the benefits of asking them to feedback. So it ties into the sooner, safer, happier, sensible way of using emergence rather than just imposing change, I find.
What would be sort of a day-to-day activity of introducing these tools into people, or into different teams? How would you go about doing that?
So with the HMRC, we trained up 9 product managers over a week. And what we did with that was climate measurement initially. And we set up 5 15-minute sessions each morning so they could get into the flow racking activity. So I just shared a Miro board in the chat, which shows how we did it for them. And at the end of it, they were quite happy. So yeah, I can see you jumping on now. Hey, Philippe, I didn't see you there. Lovely to see you again. So what they were more interested in was being able to develop their own OKRs, because that was the thing that was coming through on their strategic requirements. And at the end, they put in their views on the retro that we did. So the tools that are in the Creatable, you can use in there. So what I tend to do is get my Miro up, and then I'll link to the page that has the Creatable. I go, right, I want one of those, and one of those. And then I'll look in the templates section of Miro, go, let's get these together and get them out. If you look at the climate measurements there, you can see that one is extremely poor and one looks extremely good. On the left-hand side in the blue box, there are a couple of climate measures. So the people that were in the bad one was myself and another product management trader who came from advertising, and we just couldn't get our heads around the way they were working. It was like, how could you do this? How could you do this? So we're like, bum, 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 bum. They're going, yeah. We're more like the Hebridean folk, you know, we don't have a word of a hurry up here. So, okay. So it's one of those ones where you can see that there are differences of opinion depending on people coming into teams. So yeah, that's it. And how does the billing work for that? We have a chat. So we're currently working with a consultancy of 15,000 people worldwide, and they have a FTSE 100 client who employs 60,000, and they have asked if we can do this for all the 60,000 people. So it's one of those ones which we see the interest is coming, and for the people that want to get in quickly, we can do it on a suck it and see basis. Yeah, we're a consultancy, so we expect that there will be work coming after this, which allows people to get into the experience design, which we haven't touched upon here. So we set you up to be able to change and the things that you want to do are up to you. But we're certainly willing to chat.
Can I give a little shout out to one of the tools in Zak's collection, Matt?
Please do.
Just want to flag up that periodic table of creative problem solving techniques. And I found this a really good way in when working with lots of arts grads, including myself. And I've used it in dangerous places like the civil service, because there's sometimes a risk if you have a lot of material which looks like it might be technical, and that's, you know, perception, but perception is reality, of people being scared off from getting started. And sometimes that periodic table is just a good way to get a little bit more confidence that, you know what, we can try some pretty left field looking techniques and they actually work for us. And the moment that people have actually, you know, tried some of those creative problem solving techniques and realized that, you know what, they are actually relevant, they're useful, you come out of the meeting feeling it's been a lot more helpful and productive than the last 56 you had, that's actually a great way into realizing that, okay, some of these other techniques might be worth investing the time to get our heads around too. So I've often found that's a useful one to tip people off about, just as a way to get going.
Yeah, it's very lovely. It reminds me a little bit of Liberating Structures,
Mm-hmm.
and the lovely app that they've got. Whereas this is sort of all very much in one place, isn't it? You can scroll through that pink, you know, click on something, see what's behind it very easily. It's good.
Yeah. So a lot of people that I speak to in Liberating Structures, they go, what do we do when we're finished liberating structures? There's only 56 of them. You go, try this. Thank you. And complement it with Julia Cameron's book. I think Julia Cameron's book has the best way of getting into this stuff on a personal basis. And it's 12 weeks. If you just do a chapter a week, after 8 weeks, you can see the stuff coming out. So people like Tim Ferriss use it. People like Daniel Goleman use it. So we're a bit on trend.
Very good. One other thing that I was noticing about in the slide that talks about, I think, is it from as is agile to asymmetric advantages, also on the Miro there in the blue box as well. When it gets to experience economy, it talks about creativity and persuasion, collaboration, and so on. And there's mention of rationality through it. What about irrationality? What about, the things that, because you mentioned David Ogilvy before, and I'm a big fan of behavioral economics and BS, as they call it, behavioral science. But that whole thing about, the opposite of a good idea can be a good idea. It's all about intangible value. And actually, in the experience economy, it's more about intangible value than probably anything else.
Indeed. So the way that we approach it is the scientific method, not the scientific method that people say, that's it. We go straight back to Sir Francis Bacon, but I thought that was too far back. So when he comes up with a hypothesis, he comes up with the 4 idols of the mind. So a business hypothesis gets tested on the market. When you're testing inside your company to see if it's there, you've got to look at the internal politics. And you've also got to look at your own experience, how much of your own experience is informing this, and what is your team saying about it? So the cave and the format. And then underneath that, we encourage people, when they go into the social mode, to think with the Hegelian dialectic. So whenever you've got an idea, you bring it and use it. I see so much stuff being pumped towards user researchers that ask them to think like Sherlock Holmes. I say, no. Think like Arthur Conan Doyle. Get the 6 ideas for the storyline up. Try them out in your head. So using these techniques, it allows you to think in your head. If I'm walking along the street, I can be thinking about this stuff. If I want to cut off from it, I cut off from it, because I've got a way of planning my day and I know that I go into it when I want to. So maybe we should write another book. I'm just wondering whether I do this one before I do Managing with Tourette's. So I think most people can write that for themselves.
No, we flipping well can't. Just to pick up your question, Matt, about using irrationality, a lot of the best received tools in the periodic table of creative problem solving methods are directly about getting people to be irrational, use the subconscious, and sometimes deliberately going for perverse angles first. One of my personal favorites is good old reversals, where you start with, how can we completely screw this company up? And brainstorm all the ways you could totally destroy it, and then reverse that, because actually it gets a bit of humor in the room. It's quite cathartic, but you always get some productive ideas about it, because it turns out that some of the ways that you could destroy the company are things you're already doing. I mean, honestly, I've never once run that exercise without discovering that we're accidentally shooting ourselves in the foot. So that can be really powerful, but it's very productive as well. And it builds up confidence that we can use techniques which are different from the ones we've been told to, and we get something better from it. Which actually leaves people feeling a little bit more motivated to go and try the full on, let's really look at our creative climate and take it from there. So I use that a fair old bit.
Brilliant, thank you, Keith. Well, we're at the bottom of the hour, as I say. So that was fantastic. Great discussion. Lots of lovely tools there for us to try out as well. Thanks, Zak. And Zak will be sending me the slides so I can share everything out. This recording will be up on YouTube very, very soon, and we'll share that out on the Sooner Safer Happier social media channels. We've also put the link to the Menti there. Thank you, Anne, for putting the link to the Menti. So if you can give us some feedback, that would be absolutely super. And then just to remind you, we're going to have a month off next month during the summer, so you can all go out into the gardens instead of joining us in here. And after that, then in September, we've got Pia Maria Torren, who will be talking to us about agile people, agile HR, and how we create brilliant environments for our people to thrive. So we'll love to see you there. Please come back, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.